The ground beneath your feet holds a secret. Buried under cities, highways, and shopping malls are the remnants of a revolution. Not a revolution of violence and war, but one of wheat and barley. A revolution that changed everything about what it means to be human. Today, you wake up, check your phone, maybe grab breakfast from your fridge, and head off to work or school. None of this would exist without a decision made by our ancestors roughly 12,000 years ago. A decision so profound that it divided all of human history into before and after. This is the story of the first farmers and how they accidentally created civilization. For millions of years, humans and their ancestors lived one way, and one way only. They moved. They followed herds, they tracked seasons. They knew every plant, every water source, every animal in their territory. They were nomads, and being a nomad meant being an expert at absolutely everything. You had to know which berries would kill you and which would sustain you. You had to track animals across vast distances, reading signs in broken twigs and disturbed soil. You had to make tools, build temporary shelters, predict weather, navigate by stars, and maintain complex social relationships within your small band. There was no room for specialists. Everyone had to be a master of survival, and they were good at it. Really good. Hunter-gatherers were healthier than early farmers, taller, stronger, with better teeth and more varied diets. They worked fewer hours, too. Studies of modern hunter-gatherer societies suggest they spent only 3 to 5 hours a day on survival tasks. The rest was leisure, socializing, art, music, and storytelling. They lived in a world that was dangerous, yes, but also abundant if you knew how to read it. So why did they stop? The truth is they probably didn't want to. Agriculture wasn't invented by some genius who saw a better future. It emerged gradually, almost accidentally, in at least 7 different places around the world, completely independently. The Fertile Crescent in the Middle East, China, Mesoamerica, the Andes, the Sahel in Africa, New Guinea, Eastern North America. Each developed agriculture on their own, with different crops and different animals. This wasn't a brilliant idea that spread. It was something humans stumbled into when conditions were just right, and those conditions appeared at the end of the last ice age. Around 12,000 years ago, the planet warmed. Glaciers retreated. Sea levels rose. And crucially, the climate stabilized. For the first time in tens of thousands of years, weather patterns became predictable. Wild grains like wheat and barley flourished in the Middle East. In this new stable climate, these plants grew in dense stands, providing an abundant, reliable food source. Hunter-gatherers began to harvest them, at first just as another food source among many. But grains had a special property. Unlike meat, which spoils, or most plants, which don't store well, grains could be kept for months. This was revolutionary. For the first time, humans could store significant amounts of food. And stored food changes everything. When you can store food, you can stay in one place. When you stay in one place, you can accumulate possessions. When you accumulate possession, you build permanent structures to protect them. The first permanent settlements appeared before full agriculture. Places like Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, built 11,500 years ago, show that hunter-gatherers were already experimenting with staying put. But there was a problem. If you stay in one place, you deplete local resources, you hunt out the game. You harvest all the nearby plants, you need more food in a smaller area. The solution? Start helping your food grow. This is how cultivation began. Not as a plan, but as a response to a problem humans had created for themselves by settling down. At first, it was simple. Scatter some seeds near your settlement. Pull out competing plants. Protect the area from animals. But over generations, something remarkable happened. The plants changed. When you harvest wild wheat, the seeds scatter everywhere. That's how the plant reproduces. But occasionally, a mutation occurs where the seeds stay on the stalk. In the wild, this is a death sentence for that plant. Its seeds don't spread, so it doesn't reproduce. But for humans collecting seeds, this mutant is perfect. It's easier to harvest. So humans, probably without even realizing it, kept seeds from these mutants and planted them the next year. Generation after generation, Humans were accidentally breeding plants, selecting for larger seeds, for seeds that stayed on the stalk, for plants that grew faster or tasted better. Within a few thousand years, these plants were so modified, they couldn't survive without human help. Wheat, barley, rice, corn, none of these exist in nature anymore. We created them, and they created us. The same thing happened with animals. Wolves hung around human settlements, scavenging scraps. The less aggressive ones were tolerated. Over generations, they became dogs. Wild sheep and goats were corralled, and the calmer, more docile ones were allowed to breed. Wild cattle, pigs, chickens, all transformed through this process. We call it domestication, but really, it was a partnership. These species gave up their independence, and in return, they became the most successful large animals on the planet. Today, there are billions of chickens, cows, pigs, and sheep. Their wild ancestors are extinct or endangered. From an evolutionary perspective, domestication was an incredible success for these species. But was it good for humans? This is where the story gets complicated. Early farmers worked much harder than hunter-gatherers. Agriculture is backbreaking labor. Plowing, planting, weeding, harvesting, processing grain. It's endless work. Early farmers were shorter than hunter-gatherers, with more diseases, worse teeth, and shorter lifespans. Their diets were less varied, leading to nutritional deficiencies. Skeletons from early agricultural societies show signs of anemia, vitamin deficiencies, and stress. So why did they keep doing it? Because agriculture had one overwhelming advantage. It could feed more people per square kilometer, much more. A piece of land that could support one hunter-gatherer could support 10 or even 50 farmers. Agriculture allowed, or rather forced, population growth. And once you have more people, you can't go back. If a farming community tried to return to hunting and gathering, there wouldn't be enough wild food for everyone. They were trapped. Agriculture created a ratchet effect. Each generation was locked into farming more intensively than the last. More people meant you needed to farm more land. Farming more land meant you could support more people. Round and round it went. And then something unexpected happened. With more people living in one place, eating stored food, not everyone had to farm. Some people could specialize. In a hunter-gatherer band of 25 people, everyone needs to contribute to survival. But in a farming village of 200 people, maybe a few can focus on making better tools. A few others can focus on building. Someone might become really good at organizing labor or settling disputes. For the first time in human history, you could be bad at finding food and still survive. You could spend your entire life perfecting one skill. This is the birth of specialization, and specialization is the engine of progress. The first specialists were probably toolmakers and builders. Then came potters, weavers, and metalworkers. With surplus food, some people could become full-time soldiers, protecting the stored grain from raiders. Others became administrators, tracking who contributed what and who received what. This required record-keeping, which led to the invention of writing, first in Mesopotamia, around 5200 years ago. Writing wasn't invented for poetry or history. It was invented to track grain stores and tax payments. But once it existed, it could be used for anything. Knowledge could be preserved perfectly across generations. Villages grew into towns, towns grew into cities. Cities needed organization, which led to government. Government needed funding, which led to taxation. Taxation needed enforcement, which led to laws and bureaucracy. Before you knew it, you had civilization. The word civilization comes from the Latin civitas, meaning city. Civilization is what happens when enough people live together densely enough that they need complex systems to manage their interactions. But civilization came with costs. Inequality, for one. In hunter-gatherer bands, everyone was roughly equal. There were no rich or poor because no one could accumulate much. But with stored food and property, some people could become wealthy while others had nothing. Hierarchies emerged. Kings, nobles, priests, and slaves. Warfare intensified. Hunter-gatherers fought, but usually in small skirmishes. Agricultural societies fought wars of conquest, seeking to control land and resources. Armies could be fed with stored grain, allowing campaigns that lasted months or years. Disease exploded. Living in close quarters with domesticated animals meant diseases could jump from animals to humans. Measles, smallpox, flu, these came from our livestock. Dense populations meant these diseases could spread rapidly. For thousands of years, cities were death traps. They only maintained their populations through constant immigration from the countryside. And yet, despite all this, agriculture spread, sometimes peacefully, as neighboring groups saw the advantages and adopted farming, often violently as farmers expanded into new territories, displacing or absorbing hunter-gatherers. Farmers had numbers on their side. They also had diseases that hunter-gatherers had no immunity to. Within a few thousand years, agriculture dominated most of the planet's productive land. The hunter-gatherer lifestyle, which had sustained humanity for hundreds of thousands of years, was pushed to the margins. Today, almost no one lives as a hunter-gatherer. We're all descendants of farmers, living in the world agriculture created. Cities, nations, technology, art, science, none of it would exist without those first farmers. But here's the strange part. Those first farmers didn't plan any of this. They weren't trying to create civilization. They were just trying to eat. They made small decisions, planted some seeds, stayed a bit longer in one place. And those tiny decisions, accumulated over generations, transformed the planet. Sometimes people romanticize the agricultural revolution, calling it humanity's greatest achievement. Others call it our worst mistake, pointing to the inequality, warfare, and environmental destruction it enabled. The truth is probably both. Agriculture allowed humans to reshape the world, for better and worse. It gave us the surplus needed to build everything we consider progress. But it also locked us into a system of constant growth and intensification that we're still trapped in today. The next time you eat bread, remember you're eating a plant that doesn't exist in nature. A plant our ancestors created, grain by grain over thousands of years. And that plant created us too. It created cities and writing and everything that came after. We think we domesticated wheat. But maybe wheat domesticated us, turning us from free-roaming nomads into sedentary farmers, forever tied to the land. The first farmers changed everything. They couldn't have known what they were starting, but then again, neither do we.